If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? A lot of people in the world may never know, but after listening to my speech, you will think twice about that question. Why is this, you may wonder? The answer is because often when you think you're alone in the wild, there's often a FWC game warden watching you, lurking in the shadows. Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission, or as you may know it, FWC, has always been a big part of my life because my dad has worked for them since I could walk. I've been out trapping alligators, catching bears, and cleaning up lakes. This is what got me hooked and made me want to become FWC game warden. FWC is vital to the components of all people's lives, even if they aren't outdoors people. In this speech, you'll learn what an FWC officer does on a daily basis, why wildlife laws are important, and why marine conservation is vital. Let's start with the daily duties and hardships of an FWC officer. FWC officers are responsible for patrolling all corners of the state of Florida. They patrol waterways, which include rivers, lakes, creeks, etc., the ocean. They also patrol rural woods areas, a lot of them, anything they can get their hands on. And sometimes they patrol the streets, which most people didn't know. Whether the crimes they discover deal with wildlife side of the law or not has no relevance because FWC officers are cross-deputized. What this means is that FWC officers have the power to enforce all state and federal laws. They have more jurisdiction than any other state law enforcement agency here in Florida. Whether the crimes they discover deal with the wildlife side or not is a different story. Why do they do these things, many people wonder? Well, the answer is, from the FWC official website, is officers are responsible for protecting Florida's natural resources, including fish, wildlife, and the environment, while providing a safe atmosphere for residents and visitors to recreate. So their job is more than just wildlife conservation. They're pretty much like the super police of Florida. Now that you're more educated on what an FWC officer does, let's move on to why wildlife conservation is important. Whether you realize it or not, wildlife conservation is very important because wildlife is a part of everyone's life. If you live here on this planet, drink any kind of food, drink any kind of water, eat any kind of food, then we have to conserve what we have. The human population is always dependent on animals, the ecosystem, and plants for medicine, shelter, food, etc. And a lot of very vital medicines were only made possible through the use of wildlife and plants. According to the National Wildlife Federation, every year we discover more about how to treat disease from compounds that we find in nature. We need to safeguard biodiversity to help preserve all of the potentially useful compounds that nature is constantly inventing. If we use up all of our wildlife resources, then we'll have nothing. It will cause a ripple effect. Killing one species off will kill another off. Killing one ecosystem will kill another. If we use up all of our resources, then how are we going to be able to cure diseases? Wildlife and ecosystems also can have a negative effect. As seen recently through studies, wildlife has caused diseases against humans also. According to the National Wildlife Federation again, wildlife and human health are closely intertwined, as illustrated by recent outbreaks of West Nile virus and avian influenza. As people increase their contact with wildlife, their habitat, and domestic animals, it is more likely that diseases will be transmitted between people and wildlife. We need to maintain healthy ecosystems to reduce the risk of wildlife disease for our own health and for the health of our wildlife in America. Now that you've seen why wildlife conservation is important, let's see why marine conservation is important. Marine conservation is just as, if not more important than wildlife conservation because 70% of our Earth is covered by water. As many of you noticed, the BP oil spill was a huge crisis, national crisis. It affected not only people who eat seafood, but people who commercially fish, and it also affected our economy. The ocean provides many benefits for the human population that without it, we could not live on this planet. According to the Marine Conservation Institute, oceans generate half of the oxygen that people breathe. At any given moment, more than 97% of the world's water resides in the oceans. Oceans provide a sixth of the animal protein that people eat, and they're the most promising source of new medicines to combat cancer, pain, and bacterial diseases. Living oceans absorb carbon monoxide from the atmosphere and reduce impact of climate change. Conservation of freshwater fish and ecosystems is equally important because freshwater is what literally keeps us alive. We have to drink fresh water to be able to live. We need fresh water to grow plants. According to Conservation International, though it covers less than a fraction of 1% of the Earth's surface, freshwater provides habitat for more than 10% of known animals and about 1/3 of all known vertebrate species. More than 40% of all fish are found in freshwater, which is kind of crazy because the ocean is so much bigger than the freshwater. In conclusion, FWC and departments alike are a very big part of making the world a better place for today and tomorrow. Now that you've seen what FWC does, learned why wildlife conservation and marine conservation is important, I hope that you can now have a better understanding of FWC and give them more respect. Does the word Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission have meaning to you? Is conservation even relevant? Hopefully the average Joe will never have to find